So we say Shabbat Shalom, Boker Tov, good morning, Baruch Haba, welcome. We welcome you to our teaching today. If you would, Bereshit, the book of Genesis, chapter 1. And we're in verse 10. Verse 9 actually. ויאמר אלוקים יגבו המים מתחת השמיים אל מקום. So here he says, and said God, for the waters to be gathered together all in beneath the heavens, the water underneath, the lower waters, to be gathered together, mikom, el mikom, to a place, echad, one, literally a unity, in a unit. Ve tera'eh hayabasha vayhi kain, and God saw that it was good. All right, that it was so. The dry land appeared, and God saw that it was so. So he says for all of the water to be gathered together in one place. So how many of you have heard of a land called Pangaea? Have you heard of a land called Pangaea?
Yes.
Yes. What Pangaea was a supercontinent. It no longer exists, but it was a supercontinent. And what it was, it's been discovered by geologists and geophysicists and all those kind of good geo people. Geocache. Does anybody here go geocaching? I knew that. But we spent half of our Colorado trip geocaching. Anyway, not really. It is fun. So, as long as somebody doesn't eat the bubble gum, you know, that you're gonna that was left there, you know, they just leave the wrapper. But, anyway, so what Pangaea was a supercontinent. The supercontinent was that the Earth at one time was one single continent. Basically, that the Earth was all one single continent, which the geologists have named Pangaea. Pan meaning across everything, Gea, everything involved. All right, so everything was all gathered together in one place. You can more or less, I was going to put this up, but I got lazy and I didn't do it. You can more or less see that in the shapes of the continents today. The idea is that Africa on the western edge has that bulge out, right? And that fits really neatly in northern South America, and they're into the Caribbean, and where Central America is that little isthmus or whatever. So, and you can see how Africa just nicely fits in there like a puzzle. Okay, and the continent that we're on, the North American continent, kind of fits nice with Europe, and so you can kind of just smash everything together. You can flip India. You can just kind of push India this way a little bit and bring Australia back over and where the Indian Ocean was, and you can put Australia up in there. And so there's a few different theories about how it all fit together. But basically, we do understand that particularly Africa and South America and all were at one time a single continent. This all goes into continental drift, okay, that the continents are drifting apart. Okay, and it goes into the whole issue of volcanoes and earthquakes and all of those kinds of things. Okay, it's all caused by this. Basically, what it is that the earth, that the upper layer of the earth, is sitting on water. Okay, is floating on water, and that kind of acts as a cushion for us, shock absorber. Also, it helps cool down the core of the earth somewhat, so that it's not hot from underneath here. It also acts as an automatic sprinkler system, okay, for the entire earth. And so the whole earth was sitting in this water, and it still exists today to some extent. This is where in the flood of Noach it says that the fountains of the deep were broken up. These are these underneath layers of things of water. You can go anywhere in the world today, and if you have you can drill down and hit water somewhere. Sometimes it takes a lot of drilling, but you can, and it's called the water table. And so there's water everywhere you go underneath the ground. Back in pioneer days, going to give you some cool things to think about. Back in pioneer days, one of the ways that they knew where water was where the mesquite trees were going. I'm talking about underneath water. Not table water, but underneath water. They knew that there was water because of the mesquite trees. If you had a big old mesquite tree, they knew that there was water there. Why? Because that's what the taproot of the mesquite goes down to the water table. And so when you have a big mesquite tree there, you know that there's a big old root going down there. You know that there's a good water table underneath. That root goes all the way down to the water table. And so basically they would find where a mesquite tree is growing, and they would plant their well next to that mesquite tree because they knew that they would find water there. These underneath water cisterns today are called aquifers. There's a very famous, a big one in San Antonio, right? Called the Edwards Aquifer. And all of San Antonio, they don't get their water out of the river, they get their water out of this aquifer. And it stays at a relatively constant level, and it's fresh, clean water that just sits there, and basically it runs in from the rainwater, and so, but it's a huge underneath cavern under the mantle of the earth. And it goes, I forget how many hundreds of square miles that consists of this aquifer. It comes all the way down almost to Corpus Christi, and it cuts across to the west and up into San Antonio and all through there. And so a lot of those farmers, they just have wells, and they tap the aquifer. And basically if you live in the country, you have free water. The same thing, you can do it here. The only problem is that we're close to the Gulf, and so you get seawater mixed in, and so a lot of times it's salty water. We had an old wooden church on the other side of town, and it had well water. It was an old church and frame building, pier and beam building, and it had a well in the backyard. And if you were really thirsty, you didn't want to drink that water because it was kind of salty, And if you couldn't grow anything using that water for irrigation because it was kind of salty, and it would kill the plants. If you gave too much water, it would kill the plants. But out at our house, the man that lives across the street from us, we have canal, but the county cut his pipe and refused to replace it. And so he was trying to dig a well, and I think he got down to about 30 feet, and he couldn't hit anything out there. So we have canal water. But these aquifers were underneath the earth all over. Okay? So we're going to be talking about things like that this morning. And one of the questions that the Ravim ask, that the rabbis ask, is, he says, let the water that is beneath the heavens gather into one place and let dry land appear. Well, where is this land? Where does this land come from? Where does this land that appears come from? And then there's geological questions, what is heavier, the water or the land? So if the water is heavier, then the land should not have come out. If the land is heavier, then it should have already been out, because it should. There's this thing going on, like a teeter-totter. So you have if you have water and the land is heavy, the land is heavy, then it should be under the water and it should never come out. Okay? If the water is heavier, then it should have already collapsed and the land should already be there. But remember that the second verse says that the whole earth was covered with water, the face of the deep. So then where does this land come from? So the Talmud says that the dust is mixed up in the water, and it's called out in Ha'aroch that the original state was cloudy water. So basically the dust particles are floating around in the ocean, is what it's saying. So that the water is not this clear blue crystal. It's more like, when you go down to the island. Kind of a greenish, grayish, brownish, I don't know if I want to get in it, color. You ever cross the Mississippi? Yuck! That water looks nasty. Okay? I have a hard time imagining, because we're used to mostly clean rivers and things like that. Clean as opposed to what? Because at the time that river was clean, but it's gathering all the silt off of the land, and it makes it a very silty, very cloudy river. Okay? So that's the way the seas were. That's the way the ocean was. It was very cloudy, very murky. And that when Hashem separates the land from the water, calls the land out from the water, that he draws out all that murkiness. He draws out all of those dust particles. And instantly they're all gathered together in one place. And so cloudy water full of particles of solid matter scattered throughout. At this point, God decreed for the water to rearrange itself in a manner which would separate the solid particles from it. As a result, the solid particles, earth, would become visible above the water as a distinct phenomenon. And so rather than being all mixed up, God calls the dirt particles out from the water, separates them, and the dirt particles become land. We know that there is much more water. Even today, there's much more water than there is land. Okay? Basically, this is an unusual planet, not only in the solar system, but in the universe, in that this planet contains water to begin with, that the planet contained water. Now, they're looking for water on Mars. They have found ice particles, so there's some type of water there on Mars. But to have water that is accessible. So in other words, if something happened on this earth and we all had to move to Mars, God forbid, we all had to move to Mars, we would not last very long there, because there's not enough water there. There may be water there, but there's not enough water to sustain. And what kind of water? What is the composition of this water? And all of that would need to be tested out. There's ice particles on comets and things like that. And when we're thinking about ice particles and we're thinking about water, so these comets are covered with water. Well, not necessarily. There's nitrogen. There's all kinds of gases and such that can be frozen into ice. And so that's not necessarily water with which we could survive. So this planet is peculiar in that it has water at all to any extent. That it has this amount of water, so that when one goes out to space, the further out one goes, the less land one sees, the more water that one sees, because water is the greater content of this earth. So that they call this the big blue planet. The reason why they call it the big blue planet is because when someone is out there and they're looking back at the planet, that's what it looks like, a big blue marble. The blue comes from the water. Comes from the water. And so it is, in effect, we could say a miraculous thing that this earth has this much water. And so God decrees that the water is arranged in such a manner that it allows for the particles to leave it, to depart, and to be gathered together in one place. Now he does this by his word. He speaks it, he says, lemor, and saying, Elohim, God. And God said, let the water and the land separate. And so the water and the land separates. When the land separates, because he calls the water to gather all in one place, then that also means that all of the land is gathered together in one place. And so, as it were, 2/3 of the planet would be covered in water, and 1/3 of the planet is this supercontinent. It is upon this supercontinent that Eden is created. That God places Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Where exactly? Well, there's all kinds of theories, particularly having to do with Iraq and over there, where this garden would be placed. Eh?
The Gulf of Persian Gulf.
The Persian Gulf, yes. And so over there, because that's Babylon, and so that's where Babel was, and that's where the tower was, and all of that. But the Chazal say no. The Chazal say Adam was literally taken from Israel. Adam was created from the land of Israel. Because that is God's land. That is his chosen place. Not only Israel, but that Adam was created from Jerusalem. But not only from Jerusalem, but from Sion. From the Temple Mount. That where the Temple Mount is, that is where Gan Eden was. Yes. Had Moriah. Mount Moriah. Okay? The mountain of God. This is where Avraham took Yitzhak to offer him up as the Akedah, as the sacrifice, the human sacrifice. Yitzhak, the offering of Yitzhak, is messianic. It is the representation of the coming of the suffering Messiah. And so it was up upon that mountain that Avraham took Yitzhak to be sacrificed. It is that same mountain which David HaMelech, the King David, in order to stop the plague that was killing the citizens of Jerusalem because of the pride of King David. King David got proud because he took a census, and this is how many rich people he had in Jerusalem, and this is how many leaders and priests and all, and so he becomes proud. Look at how great we are. Kind of like people are proud of their football teams, right? When I was in high school, we had a good football team. Well, good to us. They lost like half of their games. But I was in the band. What did I, And so we would be riding the band bus up and watch the final, And I was a class clown, and so I know y'all have a hard time believing that, but I was the class clown, and so I would be doing dumb things and saying dumb things all the way up, and we play a football game and we'd lose. It'd be an away game and we'd play a football game and we'd lose. And I'd have my head out the window and I'd be going, "We're from Rio Hondo and no one can be prouder. And if you cannot hear it, I'll say it a little louder." And I would do that all out the stadium. And then we'd get into the parking lot and there'd be all these enemy team families, going to their cars, and I'd be yelling out the window, "We're number 3! We're number 3! I'm sure you have a hard time believing that, but it's true. Proud of that little town with almost maniacal pride. And this is what happened with David. He was proud of that little town. And the idea is, what do you have to be proud of? What is there for you to have arrogance? What have you done? I tried to be very careful with this assembly, as we all should. I love this place, but frankly, it's God who has built it. The truth of the matter is, I didn't ask any of you to come here. I've not asked a single one of you to be here. We don't advertise. We have not advertised from the beginning. People would come in and say, "Well, we should advertise and let people know we're here." Okay, well. But we never have. And the reason why is because this is God's work. And He has brought in those whom He wants in. And what? Guess what? He shows them the website, or He shows them the Facebook or the YouTube or whatever, and they say, "Wow, there's a Messianic congregation here." Okay. And so we have whom He wants us to have. You see, going out and advertising like we're some kind of business, it has never sat right with me. God doesn't need us to advertise. I had a man stop me in HEB the other day. I was dressed like this, except for I had my hat on, so they couldn't see my kippah. I'm just in my black suit. And I had my hat on. And he walked up to me. And he said, "Excuse me, sir, are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yes, we are Messianic Jews." And he said, "Are you Rabbi so-and-so?" And I said, "No." The rabbi over here. And I said, "No." And he said, "Do you know him?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "But we're Messianic." And he said to me, "Can I have your information, because I have some questions for you?" He says, "I go to such and such a church here in town." He says, "But I watch, TBN and whatever, and I see some of their programs on there having to do with Judaism and the Jewish roots, and so I have some questions." So I gave him my information. Now, he literally came walking right up to me and confronted me. and asked me point blank. I mean, the first thing, not excuse me or whatever. He just walks up to me and just point blank, are you a Jew? He couldn't see my tzitzit. He couldn't see my kippah. What I'm saying to you is we have a marvelous God.
Yes, we do.
And the ones whom he wants to be here are here. And I don't worry about the rest of it. It's up to him. My responsibility is simply, you come, I teach. And then we all go out and live. Just like that. And we become family. Not even knowing, some of you a couple of weeks ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, not even knowing that anybody else existed as far as these kinds of things are concerned, and now suddenly you're family. Pretty cool, huh? You see how God draws out of the water what he needs out of the water. You have this huge body of water, and he draws out the particles, and he gathers them together in one place. Out of all the people in this valley, he's drawn out particles and gathered them together in one place. That's why we ought not to take this place and take these things lightly. Because you have, in fact, seen the hand of God at work. You say, how have I seen the hand of God at work? How did you find out about this place? Almost every single one of you have told me. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one in the valley who believed like this. And the whole rest of the valley, it's me against the valley, and they all think I'm nuts. Well, you are nuts. It takes a nut to be like this. As the squirrel said, I is one. Do you know what it takes for you to go against the flow, to go against the stream, the natural flow of things? Remember what we talked about last week? I love it when God speaks after my teachings to me. Sometimes he speaks to you. And my hope and my prayer is that these teachings are edifying to you. But after speaking last week about the easy flow, water goes easy, right? Water takes the easy route.
Yeah.
And it takes power, it takes force to make the water flow in the opposite direction. So this Orthodox rabbi from Israel, Rav Dror, I don't know if you ever see him on Facebook, but he made this point this last week. He said, only dead fish go with the flow. A live fish has to swim against the current. Only dead fish go with the current. If a fish is alive, it has to swim against the current because that's the way it gets the water through its gills, so that its gills can get the oxygen out of the water. And you don't find many fish in stagnant ponds. You don't find many fish in stagnant ponds. Remember what we talked about the Dead Sea? Mm-hmm. There has to be an inflow and an outflow, an inlet and an outlet, for that water to be alive, for that water to sustain life. And we want to live in the pond. You don't get very high waves in a pond. right? You don't get very high waves. It's always flat. It's always still. And there's always green scum floating on top. And that green scum is sucking the oxygen out of the water. So guess what else you won't find in a pond? You will not find fish in a pond. Because there is no inlet and there is no outlet. The pond gathers its water from the rain. Crater Lake. How many of you have been there?
Just you.
In your dreams? In your dreams. We had the privilege of going to Crater Lake back around 2004 or so, up in Oregon. It's called Crater Lake because it's a lake in a crater. Okay? In other words, it's a volcano. It's a pretty high volcano, like 10,000 feet or so up in the air. And that volcano went dormant thousands of years ago, and so it has been collecting rainwater ever since. Now, the thing about Crater Lake is that the water is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Crystal clear. I don't know how many hundred of feet deep it is, but it is crystal clear water and you can see the bottom. Beautiful lake. But don't bother taking your fishing poles because there's no fish in it. Because how does the fish get in and how does the fish get out? And there's not enough turbulence on Crater Lake to keep oxygen flowing into the water. Like you have in your fish tank, you know, the little pump that... So the lake, as beautiful as it is dead. That's the way many of us would prefer our lives to be. We don't want any excitement. Not too much. If there aren't any waves on the body of water in which we're living, why do you need a tugboat to come alongside of you and tie up to you and power you? Remember, that was the message from last week, the paraclete. Para meaning alongside, cleat, to tie to, which is the Ruach HaKodesh. It is the term that Yeshua uses, the Greek term that Yeshua uses when he says, I will send you a comforter. That you will not be alone. Because these waters are deep. These waters get rough. These waters destroy and crush and kill. My mom would not let me play football. That's why I did not play. So I became a band geek. I became a band hall nerd. I think the football team was actually happy I was not on the team, but because I was small. I was small for my age. I was the smallest one in my class till we got to high school, and then I kind of took off a little bit. I was still small. I never weighed much. I finally weigh 130 pounds. I'm up. So when I was in the hospital, I had gotten down to 88 pounds. And so I finally am back up to 130 pounds. When I was in high school, 130 pounds, that was like full pads, man. I mean, that's with the helmet and everything on. They'd have to lie about my weight to scare off everybody. And then they'd see me and they'd say, that guy's not 140 pounds, there's no way. The doctor had told my mom that we had thin bones. I broke my arm playing football. I went to tackle a guy in PE. I went to tackle a guy. There was a hurricane fence at the edge of the field. And this big boomer, this big bruiser guy comes running up to me to block me from tackling his guy. And he hit me in the shoulder. And we all went into the fence. I went into the fence, he went into me. And I had my arm up like this and it hit the top rail, the top pole, and it crushed my arm right here. And I felt a sharp pain there, and I felt a lightning burst, and I got up and I looked and I said, my arm! Because it went like this and then down like that and then like that. And I was just there looking at it. And then I said, and everything went black. So the doctor was probably right. There were times when I would be playing football with my older brothers and sisters or kids down the road or what have you, and my mom would come out and say, son, it's getting a little rough for you. You know, I'm a little kid. And she'd come out and say, son, I think it's getting a little rough for you, you know, because these would be like teenagers and such. You know. So my mom would pull me out of the game. How embarrassing is that? That's what sometimes Hashem says to us. It's getting a little rough out there for you. He doesn't pull you out of the game. He sends you a tugboat called Ruach HaKodesh to see you through. What I'm saying to you is that there's no life in a pond. It's dead. There's no life where there's no running water and you swim against the current. You go against the standard. You go against the crowd. You are in this life. In this life, in the life of a believer in Torah-centered, Yeshua-centered Judaism. You're flowing against the crowd. Everything's against you, including you. You're against yourself. You're your own worst enemy. I am my own worst enemy. And the struggles and the fights that I have, for the most part, are with me. But it's because I'm swimming against the flow. I'm swimming against the current. You see, it used to be that, I look at the shows on TV that my parents would not allow me to watch back in the 60s and the early 70s, and those shows are tame by comparison of today's shows. And we're, we as a humanity, we're sitting here as citizens of this country, we're sitting here allowing our children to absorb that. And children are very much like sponges. Did you see Kara this morning? She was singing. She can't say all the words, but she's singing. They're sponges. It's hard to believe that just a little over a year ago, she couldn't say anything. And now she won't be quiet. Just kidding. She's precious. That's why I tell her, you're precious. Now shut up. Anyway. I don't tell her that. That only echoes inside my head. But look at everything. that your kids pick up at school, in the neighborhood, wherever they are. You better teach your kids, because if you don't teach your kids, somebody else is going to teach them. And you're not going to like what they're being taught. And sometimes, you need to find out what your kids are being taught in school. And there are times when you need to correct what your kids are being taught. One of the things that I appreciate about Mom and Dad, we went to public school, but we had it down about biology and creationism and evolution and all of that kind of stuff, so that we weren't swayed. In fact, my freshman year in high school, I had biology 1, and we were required to keep a notebook. So I decided I was going to wow the biology teacher by writing her a little poem on the front of my notebook. And the poem said, "Once I was a tadpole, beginning to begin. And then I was a bullfrog with my tail tucked in. And then I was a monkey swinging from a tree. And now I am a doctor with a PhD." I got an A on the notebook. I got a D on my poem. Apparently she did not figure I was much of a poet. We're going against the flow. We're moving against the current. But you see, this is how we are strengthened, and this is how we stay alive. Let me tell you something. When you go out there and you catch that big old bass did not get to be a big old bass by sitting in the little puddles at the bottom. He got to be that big old bass by swimming the current. Those fish out there, they don't get big by sitting still. Because one thing about a fish, if you sit still for too long, you're going to get it. That's North Carolinaese for eating. You're going to get it. You have to swim. So the rabbi said the only fish that are flowing, that are going with the current, are the dead ones. If you're going to be alive, you're going to have to fight the current. You're going to have to go against the flow. You're going to have to stand up to the crowd. So he calls out whom he will call out. He called out the dust particles from the water. And the dust particles all gathered in one place, and the water all gathered in another place. And voila, we have a place to live. By the way, what are you? What makes up you? You're like 65, 70% water, and the rest of you is dust particles. The physical you. You're that conglomeration. Maybe evolution is right. You're that conglomeration. You're the ooze that came up out of the swamp. Except I don't believe that it happened that way. I believe that God called the animals forth. But what did he make us of? He made us of dirt and water. And when we die, we go back to being dirt and water. Not we, but this body does. You continue to live. You're just not trapped in dirt and water. And so the rabbi said that in Torah Ha'arok, that God decreed the water to arrange itself in a manner which would separate the solid particles from it. As a result, the solid particles, earth, would become visible above the water as a distinct phenomenon. You are a distinct phenomenon. You're distinct. Remember what I told you, because this is all one huge continent. And Gan Eden, according to Chasal, Gan Eden is brought forth in Israel, in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, and it is from the dust of the Temple Mount that Adam Rishon, the first Adam, that Adam is taken from. He's taken from that dirt. So question, where did Yeshua Mashiach, where did they put him to death? Adam Shlishi, that's the Shlishi, the second Adam. Where was he put to death? On Mount Har Moriah, on Mount Moriah, at the place of the skull. There's conflicting theories as to why it was called the place of the skull. Some think that there was a place there that actually looked like a skull, but others say that because that is where Adam was buried. Because that part of the mountain is known to be cavernous. And so it is believed that the skull of Adam was kept near that spot, near that place. And so it's called the place of the skull. Golgotha. What I'm trying to get you to see is that where the first Adam was taken from that which he was created, and where he lived and where he died, where he sinned, there's an amazing thing in Torah that says that when the Beit Hamikdash is built, that no tree is to be on the top of the mountain. That there is no tree to be there. Why? Because there were two trees there to begin with. One was the tree of life, Etz Chayim, and the other was of the knowledge of good and evil. They ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree they were commanded not to eat. Thus God said, God removes the tree of life, lest they eat of it, and in their sinful state, in their fallen state, they live forever. This is all on the same mountain. And God requires that no tree be planted on top of the mountain. Is that not amazing? So where Adam is created and where he's buried, according to the sages, is the same place where Abraham offers Yitzhak, on the same mountain. And there's no tree on that mountain now. How do I know that there's no tree there? Because Yitzhak asks of Abraham. They had to bring their firewood. In the same place where Yitzhak is offered, David HaMelech offers his sacrifice to stop the plague. And it is that land on top of this mountain that he gives to the people of Israel as Beit HaMikdash, as their temple. And it becomes the Temple Mount. It is on top of that very mountain that Solomon builds Beit HaMikdash. It is on top of that very mountain that Yeshua is tried, and it is on top of that very mountain that he is executed. And it is on that very mountain that he is buried. Think of it. Think of the logistics of making that happen. Only God could do that. He calls the earth out of the water. And yet we are earth contained within water. Remember when I said that it's all symmetric. That what is done on one side is done on the other. It's all even and equal. So that you can take the form of the smallest atom and it has the same form as the great universe. The galaxies look like it. The solar system looks like it. It all has the atomic configuration. What is done on one side must be done on the other, to the extent as what is done in heaven, so may it be done on earth. And so what happens to the water, because if you remember, we began all of this last week teaching that the water represents the masses of people, humanity. So we are in this natural and physical form, just like the seas. Even in our very physical creation, we're just like the seas. This explains to us, in effect, a curious story in the Brit Chadashah. This story of Yeshua walking on the water. Have you ever asked yourself, why did he do that? Why did he do that? Why did he? And he doesn't do it once, he does it twice. He calms the seas, right? He walks on the water once. Twice he calms the seas. They're going across one time and he's asleep in the boat. And the disciples are all trying to fight for their lives. He is acting as the Parakletos. Now, in such a moment, who knows how we're going to react? But come on. Is God going to sink the boat with the Mashiach in it? Really? They're all fearing for their lives. Why? Because they were having a problem with confidence and trust. They were having a panic attack. They were having a rush of fear. They didn't know how they were going to handle this. And they didn't know, is he really who he says he is? Who else was asleep in a boat? Yeah. And Jonas is a forerunner of Mashiach, taking the gospel to the Goyim. So there's Yeshua, Mashiach, asleep in the boat. And they come and they wake him up. You know, wake up, wake up. Apparently he's a deep sleeper. They're there, wake up, and he gets up. What? You know how you are, right? On Sunday morning, when the kids come in, wake up, wake up. It's amazing how I had a hard time. Mother always amazed at this. I had such a hard time getting up in the morning for school. But man, Saturday morning come along and I was up, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, 6 o'clock in the morning, still in my PJs. And I'd crawl up on the bed with Mom and Dad because the TV was in their room, and so I would crawl up on the bed, and you see Casper the Friendly Ghost came on at 6 o'clock in the morning. That was the first cartoon. And so we'd be awake before 6 o'clock and be down there and on bed ready for Mom we'd be there, and it would still be like the test pattern, you know. How many of you remember the test pattern and the American flag or the big Indian chief or whatever, you know, and he'd be up there and we'd be sitting there cross-legged, sitting on bed waiting, just watching. And Dad would wake up, what are y'all doing? We're watching TV. But there's nothing on. What are you doing? But that's on. The big head Indian chief. So he's asleep. They wake him up. And he says, what's the matter? How is it that you can sleep in this storm? How is it that you can have such peace in this storm? And he says to them, really? Really? He's the master of the wind and he's the master of the waves. And he stands up in the boat and he says to them, Shalom, peace, be still. And instantly, the wind drops down. Instantly, the waves drop down. And there they are on a smooth lake, having a nice little cruise. Another time he tells them, I'm going to go pray. Y'all go on across. I'll meet you on the other side. And they're like, does he have like a little raft or a boat stuck away somewhere here? You know, hidden in the underbrush? Or they asked the question. They said, how's he going to get across? He can't run fast, so we got a straight line. What's the shortest distance between 2 points? Straight line. See, I remember certain things. They're going straight across. And that night, that's when the great storm came up. Remember? They were rowing and rowing and rowing, trying to get across the other side. And the harder they rowed, the more backwards they went. Do you ever feel that way in life? Mm-hmm. The harder you're rowing, and that current is pushing you back and pushing you back. Huh? You hear it say it 3 steps forward, 1 step back? How about 3 steps forward, 4 steps back? Because that's what was happening to them. They were going backwards. And here he comes walking on the water. And they think that it's a ghost. Some kind of spirit, some kind of... How was he able to walk on top of the water? You heard about the rabbi, the priest, and the Baptist preacher? They went fishing together. And they got out there in the middle of the lake. And the rabbi says, I forgot my lunch. Let me go get it. And he gets out of the boat, and there he goes, walking on the water. He comes back, and the Baptist preacher's like, how'd you do that? Do what? Just went and got my lunch. The priest says, you know what? I forgot my bait. I don't know what kind of fishermen these are. He gets out and he walks across the water, gets his bait, comes back, it's in the boat. Baptist preacher said, I can't have a rabbi and a priest outdo me in this. I'm going to have to show him. So he tells them, I forgot my Coke. Because, they can. I forgot my Coke. And he steps out of the boat, splunk, and down to the bottom. And the rabbi turns to the priest and said, didn't you tell him about the rocks?
Hey.
And the priest said, I thought you did. So, you can't walk on water. Unless you have this tremendous trust that he talks about moving mountains and causing seas to get up and move over there. Remember last week? He walks on the water. Why? Because he's the living water. And he knows how to do it. He knows how to be in one dimension and yet be in another dimension. He knows how to be in a parallel universe. And he can walk on water, and he can walk through doors, and he can walk through walls, and it doesn't bother him. Because he can turn himself in such a certain way that his molecules don't get mixed up with the molecules which he's going through. They've already discovered this thing in physics. And so he's able to do this. He walked on the water because he's the master of the water. In Pirkei de Ravi Eliezer, chapter 5 and verse 1, he says, forthwith the waters became proud, talking about creation day. Forthwith the waters became proud, and they arose to cover the earth as at first. They arose to cover the earth as at first, when the Holy One, blessed be He, rebuked them, subdued them, and placed them beneath the soles of His feet. Saying what? It was the Creator who first walked on the water. This was not the first time for Yeshua to walk on the water. He's already been here before. He's already done it. I've already been to Fiesta, Texas. Got the t-shirt. Right? Yeshua says, no big deal. I've already done this before. The sages talk about it. Remember last week I told you that the waters were misbehaving. The waters are misbehaving. They're kind of just doing what they want because that's the way water is. Like you, like me. We take the easiest route. It takes authority, it takes power, it takes force to make us go against the flow. The waters became proud and they arose to cover the earth. Sea of Galilee much? In the middle of a storm? By the way, they say that the waves on Galilee can become tremendous. Standing up 15 feet high sometimes. Because it's a lake, a big lake. And the winds come roaring down into that valley. And causes the sea to stand up. They arose to cover the earth as at first, when the Holy One, blessed be He, rebuked them. What does Yeshua do? He rebukes and subdued them and placed them beneath the soles of His feet. He's walking on top of the water. Why? Because He controls them. They don't control Him. He controls it. It does not control Him. How many of you, how many of us here are tied alongside the Parakletos, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit? They're with him in the boat. And they think that the boat is going to sink with the creator of both the boat and the wind and the water being in the boat. What I'm saying is this: the storm is going to rise. And you're going to be out there in the middle of the lake. And you're going to think that all is lost, that there's no hope, that there's no way, that there's nothing that can be done. And he's up there saying, what about me? Here I am. Or he's going to come walking out to you and say, hey, don't be afraid, I'm here too. I'm with you in the boat. I'm not with you in the boat, I'm actually walking on top of the water. Because the water does not do to me, I do to it. The water doesn't rebuke me, I rebuke it. Who's in control of your life? What is controlling your life? If it's outside influences, if it's the storms of life, if it's this, if it's that, it's finances or it's health or whatever the issues are. But you see, they don't rebuke the Creator. The Creator rebukes them. And the Creator is in you, and you are in He. And we are echad, we're one. Saying that the storms of life, the waves of life, and the things that look dangerous, and the things that look bad, and the things that look this, and the things that look that, and they worry us, and they scare us, and they frighten us, and they bother us, they have no control over God, and God is with me. So the question is, as the scripture says, God is for us, who can stand against us? So that Yochanan and Kepha say to the Sanhedrin, God is with us, and we will obey Him. What can man do to us? What can you do to us? What the three friends of Daniel said in the heater, the what? Fiery furnace. Thank you. Sorry. But they didn't have propane back then. Anyway. But what did they say? Before, we talked about this last week, before Nebuchadnezzar throws them in, he insists that they bow down. We will not bow down. Then I'm going to make it 7 times hotter. Yet we will not bow down. Because our God will save us. And if He chooses not to, yet we still will not bow down. Is our trust and confidence in God that strong that we will not yield to man or creature, but only yield before God Himself? We will not stop and we will not quit. He's called Adonai Tzavaot for a reason. Adonai Tzavaot, the Lord of hosts, literally the Lord of the armies. The armies of God. You think of the myriads, the thousands and tens of thousands of angels that serve Him. How great this God is. How marvelous and wonderful He is. And yet we look at a few people and what they're saying about us and how they're acting, and it bothers and it gets us upset, and we get all bent out of shape and all of these things. because they contradict us on Facebook. We get all mad. Right? I'll tell him. I'll tell her. Put like 10 frowny faces in a line, you know. I really know you're upset. I understand. But it says that he rebukes the sea. Doesn't say I rebuke the sea, it says he rebukes the sea. Huh? This is why we're called not to take revenge on people when they do things against us, rather to love them and to pray for them. Why? Because he is the avenger, and vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. You see, he will rebuke the sea when it rises up, and he will calm the wind when it's howling. He will come, and he will protect us, and he'll take care of us. And if not, well, I get to go to the other side. Huh? I get to go to the other side. I get to go into eternity. And what's bad about that? What's so bad about that? That's the real life, and it's more real than here, and this is the pretend life. This is the make-believe world. We don't want to leave the make-believe world. Well, I understand. We don't want to turn the TV off either, you know. We want to live vicariously through the actors and actresses on the television. We're going to close here. I used to want to have lived back in the 1800s. I really did. Horses and buggies, lanterns. The next best thing was being Amish, right? Because they don't have any electricity and they have to go out to the well and do all of these kinds of things. My wife thought I was insane. I got so to the point where I would not turn the light on in the bedroom. I had kerosene lanterns hanging on the wall, and I would turn those on for light, and I would read by the kerosene light. It was okay till I got a headache, you know, because the fumes, but I really did. We go out west, and I'm out there in the west and seeing the land, how it was when the pioneers were going through, and I was like, man, it would have been great to have lived back then. Except I'd be dead. Twice over, because they didn't have hospitals and doctors back then like we have today.
Yeah.
When I was in second grade, I was bit by a mosquito or something, and I got encephalitis, water on the brain. My fever went up to 108 degrees. I was literally cooking my brain in my skull. The doctor told my mom, if he comes out of it, he'll be a vegetable the rest of his life. But we really don't think he's going to come out of it. Well, I did come out of it. Vegetable? No, just slightly tilted to one side. A little crazy, right? That's my excuse. What's yours? You know, I mean, I have a reason for being crazy. My brain literally went through the frying pan. When I had cancer this last year, they would not have been able to save my life. In fact, just a few years ago, they would not have been able to save my life. So now all of a sudden, I'm glad I'm living in the age where I'm living, where they could save my life, where God could use them to save my life. Don't be afraid. The rabbi said, he made the sand as the boundary of the sea, just like a man who makes a fence for his vineyard. When they rise and see the sand before them, they return to their former places. It is said, saith the Lord, fear you not me, will you not tremble at my presence, which have placed the sand for the boundary of the sea. Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 22. What? God's in control of everything. Everything is in his control. When I live, when I die. This and that. The storms of life, the problems. Yep. Job, yep. Home, yep. He doesn't just know all about it. You're living through His will. And He knows when to step out of the boat, and He knows when to say enough. He knows when to rebuke. You and me, we live the life. And just like the fish in the stream, it ain't a boring life. There's always other fish after us, and not only that, but we have to keep swimming upstream to stay alive. We have to keep fighting to stay alive. I don't know about you. I have not lived a boring life. I have not lived a boring life. And with God in the vessel, I'll ride out the storm. It's a little chorus we used to sing. With Christ in the vessel, I'll ride out the storm, ride out the storm, ride out the storm. With Christ in the vessel, I'll ride out the storm until He takes me home. Sailing, sailing home, sailing, sailing home. With Christ in the vessel, I'll ride out the storm until He takes me home. We sang it last week. He's the master of the wind. He's the maker of the rain. And when the storms come, He'll make the sun shine again. For He is the master of the wind. Joy, would you close?
Excuse me. Thank you for everything that you've done for us, for me, my family, everybody here at Assembly. Thank you, Fred. Just, that we always listen to your word, that we meditate on it, stay quiet, listen to you, help each other, around us.
Let's all stand for the blessing. You lift up your hands. Yivarecha Adonai ve'yishberecha. Ya'er Adonai panecha. Excuse me, let me start again. Yivarecha Adonai ve'yishberecha. Ye'panav alecha v'chunecha. Yisa Adonai panav alecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. May Adonai bless you and keep you. May Adonai shine His face upon you and be gracious unto you. May Adonai lift up His countenance upon you and fill you with His peace from Sarcha Shalom Yeshua Mashiach v'indu. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.